The fire had burned low by the time the night settled across the open land, stretching quiet and wide like it had been holding its breath for years. The wind carried the smell of dust, dry grass, and wood smoke, the kind that clung to a person's clothes for days. Out on that lonely stretch of the frontier, nothing ever felt safe, especially for a woman who had already lost more than most could bear. She sat beside the flames with her hands pressed tight together, as if trying to hold herself steady. Her light hair, once neat and cared for, now hung in tired strands around her face. Her dress was worn, the kind of wear that came from work, not fashion. She looked like someone who had fought too hard for too long. Anyone passing through would have known she was a widow before she ever spoke a word. There was a heaviness in how she breathed, a weight resting on her shoulders that the frontier seemed determined never to lift. Across from her, close enough for the firelight to touch his skin, sat the Apache warrior who had found her hours earlier. He was strong, calm, and silent, in a way that made it seem like the night listened to him instead of the other way around. His long black hair rested against his shoulders, catching the glow of the flames. Tribal jewelry lay across his chest, the kind passed through families for generations. His presence alone felt steady, like he had seen danger so many times that fear no longer reached him. She kept her eyes on the fire, trying not to look in his direction, even though she felt the warmth of him beside her. She had not wanted help. She had not wanted company. But when she collapsed near the dried creek bed, unable to carry her small pack any farther, he had stepped from the shadows without a weapon raised, without a threat on his face, and simply offered his hand. She had been too weak to say no. Now she whispered the same words. She had whispered every time she had looked at him since sunset. "Help me and leave." Her voice trembled, the words barely stronger than the crackle of burning wood. "Please, just help me and leave." He did not move. He did not rise. He only watched her with those dark, steady eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. She flinched, not because his voice was harsh, but because it wasn't. It was calm, almost gentle, and that frightened her more than any raised weapon could. Gentle men in the West didn't last long. Gentle men were taken advantage of, or killed, or broken by the land. And she'd already watched one gentleman die. Her husband had been the kind to give more than he had, the kind to smile even when he should have feared for his life. The frontier did not spare men like that. She rubbed her hands together again, trying to chase away the cold that had nothing to do with the air. "You don't understand," she said softly. "Trouble follows me. I don't want it following you too." His gaze did not shift. "I decide who I follow, and I decide who follows me." She shook her head, refusing to accept that answer. "You shouldn't stay. You shouldn't help me. You don't even know me." The warrior looked toward the dark land stretching beyond the campfire. Coyotes cried in the distance, high and restless. The moon hung heavy over the horizon. Finally he spoke. "I know enough." She turned toward him despite herself. "Enough of what?" He picked up a handful of dirt and let it fall slowly through his fingers. "Danger rides close to you. I could smell it before I even saw you. I saw tracks too. 3 riders, moving fast. They were following you, not traveling the land for no reason." She swallowed, her heart thudding hard enough to make her fingers shake. She had hoped he wouldn't notice. She had hoped the riders had lost her trail. But nothing escaped a warrior trained to read the earth like it was a living story. She wanted to lie, to pretend she didn't know who the riders were or why they were chasing her. But her voice caught in her throat. He didn't press her. He simply waited, leaving the silence open for her to walk into if she chose. After a long moment, she whispered, "They killed my husband. Not even for land or money, just because they could." She drew a shaky breath. "And when I ran, they decided to finish what they started." He watched the fire, not her. The flames reflected in his eyes like gold resting on stone. "You think they won't keep coming? You think telling me to leave will stop danger from finding you again? I don't want you hurt," she said. "You're safer away from me." He shook his head once. "The land is dangerous for anyone. Staying with you does not make it more so. And if those riders come, they will not like what they find." His tone was not a threat, not a boast. It was simply a fact, spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had survived enough battles to know what he was capable of. She felt something tighten inside her chest. Not fear, something else. Something she had not felt in months, maybe years. The faintest sense that she was not alone in the world, even though she wanted to be. Being alone meant no one else got hurt. Being alone meant she only had to lose herself, not someone else. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I can't lose anyone else. I can't have your blood on my hands." His eyes shifted toward her then, slow and steady, the way a mountain shadow moves with the sun. "If danger comes, it comes for both of us. If blood is spilled, it will not be mine." The fire popped, sending a spark into the night. She watched it flicker and die, swallowed by the dark. She wanted to stand up and walk away from him. She wanted to insist that she didn't need anyone's help, that she had survived this long alone. But her legs were weak, her body tired, and deep inside she knew the truth. She would not have survived the night without him. She wasn't sure she would survive the next one. Still, she tried one last time. "I'm a widow. I have nothing to offer you. No land, no safety. No reason for you to stay?" He leaned forward slightly, the fire highlighting the shape of his shoulders, the lines of the tribal markings on his skin. "You asked me to leave because you are afraid. But staying has nothing to do with what you can offer." "Then why?" she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "Why stay for someone like me?" For the first time since he found her, his expression changed. Not a smile, but something close to it, something quiet and unreadable. He glanced toward the darkness behind her, the place where shadows moved in ways that did not belong to the wind. "Because danger is closer than you think." She stiffened. "What do you mean?" He rose slowly, his muscles tightening, his posture turning sharp. The firelight flickered across his chest and the jewelry around his neck. He looked past her shoulder again, his eyes narrowing. Then he spoke in a low voice that made her blood turn cold. "We are not alone." Before she could turn, before she could breathe, before she could reach for the small knife she kept hidden in her dress, he lifted his hand in warning, "Stay still," and in the space between her heartbeat and the next, she heard it. A soft shift in the grass behind her, a single step, someone watching them from the dark, someone who had followed her here, and suddenly she knew the truth. Riders had found her. The introduction ends here with suspense. If you want the next 1,200-word background section, just tell me. The sound behind her was faint, only a shift of grass, but out there in the open land. Even a quiet movement carried weight. She felt her breath tighten as the Apache warrior slowly straightened his back, his body turning alert. The firelight moved across his face, showing calm, not panic. It was the kind of calm that came from someone who had lived through danger many times before. She wanted to turn around, but fear held her still. Her fingers curled into her skirt, trying not to shake. The warrior kept his eyes locked on the darkness beyond her shoulder, watching for another sound. His chest rose with slow breaths, the steady kind that came right before action. The night around them grew thick and silent, as if everything in the world was waiting to see what happened next. Then another sound came. Not a footstep this time, but the quiet scrape of something brushing against a dry bush. She knew that sound too well. She had heard it when she was fleeing weeks earlier. She had heard it the night her life had changed forever. The riders always moved like that, silent when they needed to be, confident that their prey would be too scared to fight back. The Apache warrior stepped in front of her without a word. Placing himself between her and the unseen threat, she watched his back, the way the muscles tightened beneath his skin, the way he leaned slightly forward like he was ready to strike if needed. She felt safer with him there. Even though she didn't want to admit it, a faint rustling came again, farther to the right this time. The warrior lowered his voice. "Only one, maybe two. They are testing the edge of the camp." She swallowed hard. "They know I'm here." "They knew before nightfall," he answered. "They have been following you longer than you think." His words sent a chill through her, a reminder of how far trouble had chased her across the old American land. She had left her home after her husband was killed, taking only what she could carry. But trouble traveled faster than grief. The men who had taken everything from her were not the kind to leave a witness alive. She had avoided towns, avoided people, hoping to lose them in the emptiness of the frontier. But the frontier didn't hide secrets well. Tracks stayed in the dirt. Smoke rose in straight lines. Every mistake left a mark behind. She lowered her eyes to the fire, wishing she could disappear into the warmth. She felt the weight of her past pressing down on her, sharper now, with the warrior standing between her and danger. She knew she shouldn't let him protect her. She knew he didn't deserve to be dragged into her trouble. But she also knew she didn't have the strength to survive another chase alone. The warrior raised his hand slightly, signaling her to stay quiet. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the shadows. His movements were smooth, silent, practiced through years of hunting and surviving on rough land. She wanted to call him back, tell him not to risk himself. But the words stayed trapped in her throat. For a moment, everything went still. The wind held its breath. The flames flickered low. The grass stood stiff as stone. When the warrior spoke again, his voice was low. "Whoever is there, come forward." The night stayed silent. He waited, then repeated, "Come forward." Still no answer, but she could feel it in the air. Someone was out there, watching. Someone waiting for the right moment. The warrior slowly returned to the fire. Not because the threat was gone, but because he understood the pattern. "They won't attack tonight," he said quietly. "They're waiting to see if you move by morning." She closed her eyes, a mix of relief and dread washing over her. That was the rider's way. They preferred chasing their prey across the daylight land, letting fear wear a person down. They enjoyed the hunt more than the kill. The warrior sat beside her again, but his posture stayed alert. His eyes scanned the shadows while the fire warmed their hands. She could feel the tension in the air. A kind that didn't fade even when she tried to breathe slow. He didn't look at her when he asked, "How long have they been following you?" She hesitated, but only for a moment. "A week. Maybe more. I tried to lose them in the hills, but they always seemed to find me again." He nodded once, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "They are trained, not ordinary troublemakers." She rubbed her arms, trying to chase away a cold that had settled beneath her skin. "I didn't know who they were at first. I didn't know why they came to our homestead. We lived quiet, never bothered anyone. Then one night everything changed." The warrior listened without interrupting. She felt the weight of his attention even though he didn't turn his head. It made the memories come easier, even the ones she wished she could bury. "My husband heard horses outside." Before he could reach the door, they were already inside. They didn't take anything. Not money, not food, not tools. She shook her head slowly. They just wanted him gone. She touched the locket around her neck, her fingers trembling. "After it happened, they told me I shouldn't stay alive either. But there was a back door, and somehow I made it out." The warrior's jaw tightened slightly. "So they want to erase the past. Anyone who saw them. Anyone who lived through it." She nodded. "That's why I ran. But running hasn't stopped them." He raised his eyes to the open land again. "They follow because they think you are weak. People who kill for sport believe fear makes prey easier to corner." She glanced at him, her voice quiet. "Do you think I'm weak?" He turned his head then, meeting her gaze for the first time since the sound in the grass. "You made it across dangerous land alone. You kept moving when most would have given up. That is not weakness." Her breath hitched. The words felt heavier than comfort. They felt like truth. But truth didn't stop danger from chasing her. The fire crackled as he added another dry branch. Sparks floated into the night, rising toward the stars. She watched them drift, wishing her life would drift somewhere safe for once. But safety was a rare thing in the West. The land was harsh, and people were harsher. He spoke again, quieter now. "Tell me the rest. I cannot protect you if I do not understand what hunts you." She looked down at her hands, at the dirt beneath her nails, at the faint cuts that hadn't healed. She wondered how much he could handle. She wondered how much she could relive. "There was another thing," she whispered. Before my husband died, one of the riders searched through our house. He looked for something, papers, a map. I never knew what it was. But when he didn't find it, he grew angry. He said my husband was hiding something valuable, something that belonged to them. The warrior's eyes narrowed. What kind of map? I don't know, she said. We didn't have anything worth taking. But they didn't believe that. The warrior leaned back slightly, thinking, the West carried many secrets. Old trails, lost routes, hidden places in the mountains that only a few people knew. If her husband had found something without meaning to, it could explain why danger chased her so fiercely. He spoke slowly. And you left the house with nothing, only what I could carry. He nodded. Then they think you have it. She froze. Have what? The thing they wanted. They think you took it. They follow because they believe you know where it is. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. I don't know anything. They don't believe that. The land around them felt even darker now. The danger clearer than before. The riders weren't after revenge. They were after something they believed she possessed. Something worth killing for. The warrior looked into the shadows again, scanning the land. We cannot stay here long. When morning comes, they will move closer. She wrapped her arms around herself. Where will we go? He answered calmly. Somewhere they cannot track us easily. She felt her breath catch. Will you keep helping me? He turned toward her, his face lit gently by the fire. I told you. I am not going anywhere. But before she could speak, he looked past her again. His eyes sharpened. Something moved in the grass, not behind them this time, to their left, closer than before. And this time, whoever was out there wasn't hiding their steps. The night shifted, the danger grew, and the truth settled in her. Chest morning might be too far. Away, the warrior's eyes fixed on the dark stretch of grass to their left, and the widow felt her chest rise and fall with tight breaths. The night around them had changed again. This new sound was slower, heavier, like someone walking without caring if they were heard. Whoever stood out there no longer wanted to hide. That alone was enough to turn fear into something sharper. The Apache warrior shifted his stance, not drawing a weapon yet, but readying his body in a way that showed quiet discipline. The firelight moved across his shoulders as he listened closely. She stayed still behind him, barely daring to breathe. Her fingers curled around a small stone near her knee. Useless for protection, but something to hold on to when her fear grew too much. A long moment passed before the warrior spoke. Not a rider. This one walks on foot. She blinked, startled. How can you tell? He nodded toward the sound. Horses move different. This step is slower, careful, and alone. That didn't bring comfort. If someone walked alone through the night toward a campfire, it meant they either had desperate intentions or dangerous ones. She felt the cold creep up her spine as the grass moved again. The figure was definitely approaching. The warrior lifted one hand slightly. Stay behind me. Do not speak until I tell you. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. She watched him watch the darkness, his body steady, his expression unreadable. The fire warmed their faces, but the air felt colder than before. Then from the shadows, a voice broke the silence. It was rough, tired, and carried a tremble that didn't belong to a dangerous man. Please, don't shoot. I am not here to harm you. Her breath caught. The warrior didn't lower his guard. He answered with a firm tone. Step into the firelight. There was a pause, then a shape appeared, slow and hesitant. A man stumbled forward, dirt-covered from boots to hat, one arm clutching his side. His clothes hung loose, torn from travel. His skin looked pale under the moonlight, and one of his legs dragged as if walking caused him pain. When he reached the edge of the fire's glow, he lifted his free hand to show it was empty. The widow's eyes widened. He didn't look like one of the riders. He didn't carry their cruel confidence or sharp posture. He looked worn down, almost collapsed. The warrior studied him with careful eyes. Who are you? The man swallowed hard. Name's not important. I just need water. Maybe a little warmth." His voice broke. "Been walking for hours since my horse bolted." The warrior didn't move, but his gaze sharpened. "Why were you traveling this land alone at night?" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking briefly toward the widow. She tensed. Something in his glance felt familiar, not like recognition, but like someone carrying a secret too heavy to hide well. "I was heading toward the ridge," the man said. "Got chased out of a camp by men who didn't like me asking questions. That's all." The warrior's voice remained calm. "What questions?" The man looked at the ground. "About some riders who've been causing trouble across the territory. I thought someone might have seen them. Turns out that was a mistake." The widow's heart pounded. She exchanged a glance with the warrior, and he gave the smallest nod. He heard the same thing she did. This stranger knew about the riders. The man fell to his knees near the fire, wincing from pain. The warrior didn't stop him, but he circled slightly, watching from behind. One wrong word would expose the truth. The widow finally spoke, her voice soft. "These riders you're talking about? What do you know?" The man looked up at her with weary eyes. "More than I wanted to. I saw them 2 nights ago near the riverbed. 3 of them, armed. Mean. They were talking about a woman they were hunting." Her breath stopped. The warrior stepped closer. "What did they say?" The man exhaled shakily. "They said she ran off with something that belonged to them, and that she wouldn't see the next sunrise." The warrior's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the shadows again, scanning every edge of darkness. The stranger looked between them. "I didn't know who she was. Didn't want to know. But when I heard them say they were heading toward the plains, I started traveling the other way. Thought it'd keep me clear. Horse got spooked, though. Threw me, then ran. I've been walking ever since." The widow pressed her hands together tightly. She didn't want anyone else getting tangled in her danger, but it was already too late for this man. He was clearly telling the truth. She could see fear behind his eyes, the kind of fear she had carried for weeks. The warrior finally relaxed his stance, though he remained cautious. "You can stay by the fire for now, but speak true. If you lie, I will know." The man nodded quickly. "I got no reason to lie. Just need to breathe without dirt in my throat." The widow stared at him quietly, trying to decide if fate had brought this stranger to them, or if he was another sign that danger was closing in faster than expected. While the man warmed his hands near the flames, the warrior crouched beside her. His voice stayed low. "We cannot stay here till morning. Those riders are not far. If this man heard them on the plains, they travel quicker than we guessed." She nodded. Fear twisted inside her, sharp and heavy. She had hoped for a moment of rest, but the land had other plans. She looked at the stranger again. His condition was real. His injury was real. But she couldn't ignore the tremble in his hands, the way he avoided looking behind him too often. Something bothered him, something he hadn't said yet. The warrior seemed to sense it too. He approached the man, keeping a steady tone. "You said you were chased out of a camp. What camp?" The man hesitated, rubbing his forehead. "Small settlement near the ridge. Hard living. Folks kept to themselves. When I mentioned the riders, they turned cold. Said trouble wasn't welcome. Then they threatened me to leave before sunset." The widow frowned. Why would they react like that? The man stared into the fire. Because they knew those riders. Or feared them. Maybe both. The warrior's eyes narrowed. Fear can make people protect danger instead of fighting it. The man nodded weakly. They weren't bad folk. Just scared, the widow shifted uneasily. That meant the riders were not only feared, but connected. People didn't risk protecting strangers unless forced by something powerful or dangerous. The tension in her chest grew heavier. The warrior stood and walked a few steps into the dark, scanning the land. The widow watched him. His movements were careful but sure, as if he had already mapped every sound and shadow. The stranger watched him too, his eyes following the warrior with a mix of respect and uncertainty. Minutes passed in silence. The night sky stretched wide overhead, Stars scattered across the dark like grains of salt. The wind carried small sounds from distant brush, each one making her shoulders stiffen. Finally, the warrior returned. "We leave before first light. Danger is too close." The stranger looked up. "You'll help me walk." The warrior studied him. "If you can keep up, we do not move slow." The man lowered his gaze. "I'll try." The widow saw something flicker in the warrior's expression, something thoughtful. He didn't want to leave the man behind, not with an injury that would leave him exposed to the riders. But bringing him along meant added risk. Another life to protect. Another weight to carry. The widow touched the warrior's arm lightly, a gesture filled with worry. He glanced at her, understanding what she didn't say out loud. She didn't want another death tied to her. He shook his head softly. Saving people is not weakness. Her heart tightened, not from fear this time, but from how calmly he spoke. He meant it. He had chosen this path long before he found her. She wondered how many people he had carried through danger in the past, and how many he had lost. The fire crackled again. Wind shifted the smoke. And in the distance, for just a moment, they heard a faint sound. A horse. The stranger's face went pale. The widow's hand froze in midair. The warrior turned sharply toward the noise, eyes narrowing. Not close, but not far either. The widow felt dread climb into her throat. They were moving again. The riders had not waited for sunrise. They were covering ground in the dark. The warrior spoke with quiet urgency. "Rest while you can. We leave soon?" The stranger lay down with effort, groaning as he settled on the ground. The widow moved closer to the fire, feeling its warmth against her chilled skin. But warmth did not drive out fear. The warrior sat beside her again, silent, his eyes on the horizon. Shadows moved where there should have been none. The wind carried unsettled sounds. She breathed slowly, trying to calm her pounding heart. But the truth pressed harder than ever. They were running out of time, and every mile ahead held more danger than the miles behind. The fire sank lower as the hours passed, turning from bright flames into glowing embers that pulsed softly in the dark. The widow sat close to the heat, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to steady the worry twisting inside her. The night felt stretched thin, like something was pressing against its edges. Every distant rustle, every sudden whisper of wind made her heart jump. She kept glancing at the Apache warrior, needing the reassurance of his calm presence, even when she didn't want to depend on anyone. He stayed alert, never fully resting, his eyes scanning the shadows as if he could read danger the way other people read letters on a page. The stranger lay nearby, trying to rest, though sleep came only in small, painful moments. His breaths were uneven, and the look in his eyes showed he was just as tense as they were. No one could relax with the riders so close. The widow shifted slightly, trying to ease the tightness in her back. The warrior noticed the movement. "You should rest," he said in a quiet voice. She shook her head. "I can't. If I close my eyes, I'll think they're already here." His gaze softened in a way she hadn't expected. "Fear won't keep you awake forever, but courage will carry you farther than fear ever could." She looked down, her fingers brushing the locket at her neck. Courage had kept her moving, kept her alive, but courage didn't take away the memories. It didn't erase the sound of breaking wood, the shouts, the firelight reflecting off weapons. The moment she realized her entire life had changed in a single breath. Courage had limits, and she was reaching them. Before she could answer, the wind shifted again. This time it carried a faint smell of smoke, not from their fire, but from somewhere beyond the ridge. The warrior lifted his head sharply, eyes narrowing. "Another camp," he murmured. The widow frowned. "You think it's them?" He shook his head slowly. "Not sure. But someone is close enough for the wind to carry their fire." The stranger forced himself to sit up, wincing as he braced his injured side. "If it's them, we're already trapped." The warrior turned his gaze toward him. "They would not camp so near without checking our trail first. If they had found us, we would hear their horses by now." The stranger exhaled shakily. "Then who would camp out here at this hour?" The warrior didn't answer immediately. After a moment, He spoke carefully. Not all danger rides horses. Some danger walks quieter. The widow felt her stomach tighten. You think someone else is looking for us? The warrior didn't respond, but his silence was enough. She drew a slow breath. Whoever it is, we need to leave soon. He nodded. When the moon lowers, we move. The shadows will cover us best then. The stranger looked doubtful. Move where? The warrior stared into the dark horizon. Toward the canyons. Deep ground. Winding paths. Harder for riders to track. The widow swallowed. But harder for us to escape too. He turned his head toward her. Sometimes the only safe choice is the one that feels most dangerous. She looked at him quietly, thinking about how often his words made sense in ways she didn't want to admit. She felt safer with him than she had in weeks, not because he promised safety, but because he understood danger completely. He didn't pretend it was easy. He didn't pretend she wasn't scared. He just stayed. The stranger coughed softly into his hand. I can try to walk, but I won't slow you down more than I already have. The warrior shook his head. You move at your pace. But know this. If the riders catch us, they will not care who you are. They will treat you as part of the trail. The man looked down, his expression tightening with dread. Then I keep up. Somehow, the widow looked at the horizon, watching the moon sink lower. She felt the tension building with every passing minute. The land around them felt heavy, full of unseen eyes watching from the dark. She wondered if the riders were out there at that very moment, searching the ground for her tracks, whispering to each other. Waiting for daybreak. Her pulse quickened. The warrior stood suddenly, his body shifting toward the left. He lifted a hand to silence the others. She held her breath as he tilted his head, listening. A faint whistle drifted across the land. Soft, distant, almost lost to the wind. The stranger froze. That's a signal. The widow's heart dropped. The riders used signals, but the warrior shook his head. Not them. Different pitch. Higher. A warning. A warning from who? She asked, his jaw tightened. From someone who doesn't want to be found either. The stranger looked alarmed. Are we walking into something worse? The warrior glanced toward the ridge again. There are others who travel these lands in secret. People who know how to hide from danger. They warn before approaching. They watch before speaking. The widow felt her throat dry. Then who are they warning? The warrior's answer sent a shiver down her spine. Us. She looked around, suddenly aware of how exposed they were near the fire. The land stretched in every direction, wide and open, offering little place to hide. She stepped closer to the warrior, her voice barely above a whisper. Why warn us? He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Because the riders are not the only danger tonight. The stranger's breath hitched. Are you saying there's more than one group after us? The warrior shook his head. Not after us. After something else, but anything hunted in the night makes danger for anyone crossing its path. The widow's nerves buzzed. Then we need to move now. The warrior listened for another moment. When no new sound came, he nodded. Wake your strength. We leave. She helped the stranger steady himself as the warrior kicked dirt over the fire, dimming the light until only faint red embers remained. The world seemed instantly colder. Without the fire, the night wrapped around them thick and silent. The widow felt the darkness settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. They moved quietly, following the warrior's lead as he paced through the grass. His footsteps were almost silent, each movement chosen carefully. She stayed close, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. The stranger limped behind her, trying his best to move without slowing the group, as they reached a small rise in the land. The warrior paused and crouched low. He pointed ahead, and the widow leaned forward to see. A faint glow flickered beyond the ridge. Another fire. But this one burned bright and steady, larger than a single traveler's flame. She felt her breath tighten. A whole camp. The stranger grabbed her arm to steady himself. That's too big to be a hunting party. Too bright, too. The warrior studied the light. They are bold. Not trying to hide, she whispered. Could it be settlers? He shook his head. No, settlers guard their fires. They do not throw their flames into the air like a beacon. Then who? He turned his eyes to her. Someone confident. Someone who believes no one will challenge them. Her stomach nodded. The riders, he didn't confirm, but the answer was clear in his eyes. The stranger shivered. If they're camped there, they're blocking the path to the canyons, the widow whispered. What do we do? The warrior scanned the land, considering their options. His expression changed slightly as he examined the shadows to the right. There's another path. Narrow, hard, but it avoids their sight. The widow let out a slow breath of relief. Then let's take it. The warrior nodded, but his voice stayed cautious. It is not a safe route. Loose ground, sharp rocks, and no shelter. She stepped closer to him, determination rising through her fear. Nothing is safe anymore. But it's better than walking straight into them. He met her gaze. You trust my path? Without hesitation, she answered. I trust you. Something flickered in his eyes, something warm for a brief moment. But then he turned in motion for them to follow. He moved quickly now, guiding them toward a darker stretch of land where the ground dipped unevenly as they walked. The widow's legs grew tired, but she pushed forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The stranger struggled even more, each breath a strained effort. Still, the warrior kept them at a steady pace, pausing only when the wind shifted or a distant sound made him raise a hand. Near the edge of a small ravine, he stopped again. He stared into the shadows ahead, his jaw tensing. The widow moved beside him, her voice barely a whisper. What is it? He pointed toward the lower ground. Tracks. The stranger leaned forward. Tracks of what? The warrior answered quietly. Horses, more than 3. Her stomach twisted. More. He nodded. Many more. She covered her mouth with her hand. If the riders weren't alone, if others had joined them, the danger was worse than she had imagined. The warrior placed a steadying hand on her arm. We are not caught yet, but we must move faster. The stranger coughed, nearly stumbling. I'm trying. I really am. The widow grabbed his arm, helping him balance. We won't leave you. The warrior watched them for a long second, something thoughtful in his eyes. Then he turned and signaled for them to follow again. They descended into the ravine, the path narrow and uneven. Rocks shifted under their feet. The widow slipped once, but the warrior caught her wrist, steadying her. His touch was warm and strong. Anchoring her even in the darkness, they continued deeper into the land, the shadows thickening around them. The moon dipped lower behind the ridge, leaving only faint silver light to guide their way. The air grew cooler. The sound of distant horses drifted across the plains closer now. The widow felt her heartbeat climbing into her throat. The warrior glanced back at her, his voice low but certain. Do not fear the dark. Fear only stops you from seeing the way forward. She nodded, drawing a shaky breath. But the truth pressed heavier with every step. The riders were closing in. Unknown camp burned bright behind them. The hidden warning still echoed. In the wind, and somewhere in the shadows ahead, another danger waited. The climax was coming fast, and the night was running out. The wind pushed through the narrow ravine as if urging them forward before danger caught up. The widow's steps were unsteady. The stranger leaned heavily on her arm, and the Apache warrior moved ahead with quiet determination, stopping only when the ground demanded caution. Every sound seemed sharper now, every shadow deeper. But the warrior kept guiding them through the twists of the land until the narrow path widened in the night, opened into a small clearing sheltered by high stone walls. Here, he said quietly, we rest for a moment. The horses cannot enter from that side. The widow looked around, letting her breath settle. The place felt hidden, wrapped in natural stone, untouched by the trouble that had followed them so far. She helped the stranger ease down onto a flat rock. He groaned softly but managed a grateful smile. The warrior scanned the ridge above, making sure they had not been followed. Only after several moments did his shoulders loosen. The widow watched him with quiet admiration, noticing how he carried strength without ever demanding recognition for it. He moved with purpose, like someone who understood both the weight of danger and the value of protecting life. She finally spoke. "Is this where we wait?" He turned to her. "This is where we decide what comes next." She felt her heart tighten slightly. She knew what he meant. Running forever was not a life. Danger would never stop unless confronted. They could hide for a night, but the riders would still search, still hunt, still believe she carried something valuable to them, before she could ask what he was thinking. The stranger cleared his throat. "I know why they chased you." The widow and warrior both turned toward him, surprise tightening their features. He looked down shamefully. "I should have said it earlier. I did it out of fear. But I can't keep silent now." The widow steadied her breath. "Tell us." He reached into the torn lining of his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Dirt smudged the edges, but the markings were still visible. A map, but not of towns or open plains. It showed a hidden route through the mountains, a trade path long lost to most settlers. The widow frowned. "Why do you have that?" "Because your husband found it," the stranger said quietly. "He passed it to someone he trusted before the riders killed him. That someone passed it to me before he died from fever. He told me to find you. Told me the riders wanted this badly." She felt her breath leave her all at once. "My husband." He knew. The stranger nodded. He didn't want them to get it. He believed the land belonged to those who respected it. He knew the riders wanted to use the path to move stolen goods or worse. So he hid it to stop them. The widow covered her mouth, tears rising. She had thought she had nothing left of her husband except memories and the locket around her neck. But he had died protecting something bigger than himself. Something meant to keep others safe. The Apache warrior studied the map carefully. His expression grew thoughtful. "This path runs through sacred ground. Land that should never be used by those who would harm it." The stranger wiped his forehead. "I was hoping to take it to the nearest fort, warn them, but I never made it that far." The widow looked between them. "So the riders chased me because they thought I had this." The warrior nodded. "They believed your husband passed the map to you. They will keep chasing until they think their path is clear." She held the map with trembling fingers. "Then we need to make sure they never get it." The warrior's eyes softened. "And we will." A long silence followed. The night wind brushed the walls of the ravine like a lullaby waiting for dawn. The warrior crouched near her, his gaze steady. He spoke with calm certainty. "We lead them away from the path, far enough that they lose your trail. Then the map will go where it must, to someone who will protect the land, not steal from it." The widow felt warmth spread through her chest. "You'd do that for me?" "For your husband's honor," the warrior replied gently. "And for your future." His words carried something deeper than duty. Something she didn't understand fully yet, but she felt it settle into her heart, like a quiet promise. The stranger nodded firmly. "I'll deliver the map once I'm strong enough." "You have my word." The widow reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Thank you." The warrior motioned for them to rise. "Dawn is near. The riders will follow the open plains first. If we take the high ground, we will stay out of sight." She stood beside him, her legs tired but her spirit steadier. With the map no longer hidden, the truth no longer tangled in fear, she felt something inside her uncoil. For the first time since her husband's death, the path forward didn't feel impossible. They climbed slowly, the warrior helping both the widow and the stranger along sharper rocks, guiding them with patience. As the sky lightened with soft morning gray, the land below them stretched wide and quiet. No riders in sight. No danger creeping up on their heels. At the top of the ridge, the widow paused to catch her breath. The warrior looked toward the sunrise, then toward her. His expression was warm, gentle in a way she had only seen in rare moments. Small glimpses that told her he had carried his own share of losses. "You are free now," he said softly. "The riders will not follow once they lose your trail, and the map will be safe." She felt tears gather again, but this time they were soft, grateful tears. "You saved my life." He shook his head. "You saved yourself. I only walked beside you." She stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion she could no longer hide. "You didn't have to stay, but you did." He held her gaze, the morning light reflecting in his dark eyes. "I said I would not leave, and I meant it." A warmth spread through her chest as she looked at him, the world around them turning gold as the sun rose. In that light, she felt something shift inside her. Something new and fragile, but strong enough to grow. Safety, hope, a sense of belonging. She hadn't felt since before her life had shattered. The stranger smiled from behind them. "Seems like trouble brought you two together in a strange way." The widow blushed slightly. "Oh." And the warrior gave a quiet, rare smile, the kind that showed he understood more than he said. They continued over the ridge, descending toward a small valley where the land softened and the danger no longer breathed down their necks. The widow walked beside the warrior, their steps matching naturally, the fear of the past fading with each movement. By the time they reached the open field at the bottom, the widow felt lighter. The mystery of the map was solved. The riders would lose their trail. The stranger would heal. And she was no longer alone. The warrior turned to her gently. "You have a long road ahead, but it will not be walked in fear anymore." She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I don't want to walk it alone, if you would stay." He looked at her with quiet affection. "I will stay if you ask me to." She took his hand, her voice soft but full of certainty. "Then stay." He nodded once, strong and sure. "I stay." The rising sun spread across the land, lighting the old American frontier with soft gold. The wind carried the smell of new morning. For the first time in a long time, the widow felt the world open rather than close. The danger was behind them. A new beginning lay ahead, and the path forward, no matter where it led, would be walked together.